Good evening, and thank you for joining us to celebrate design and its impact in West Michigan. And thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. KCAD is honored to introduce the keynote speaker for the first annual Design Week West Michigan. And I speak for KCAD as a whole when I say you can count on us to be integral to Design Week going forward into the future. So it's an even greater honor for me because of who our speaker is. You can do the Wikipedia thing yourself and get the thumbnail on the trajectory of his accomplishments. And in fact, how many of you have Googled Richard Saul Wurman? Raise your hands. Okay. You can also go to Wurman.com and get more of the details. And just briefly, some of the details: architect, graphic design, archaeology, cartography, author, information architect, conference impresario. In fact, like really cool conference impresario. He won the Lifetime Achievement Award in Design from the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum. And he was cited for the incredible conferences that he's organized, the most important of which is TED. Very good. Okay, so you have done your homework. That's good. So when I was given the opportunity to introduce our speaker, I said yes because of the impact that Richard Saul Wurman has had in and across design disciplines, in systems thinking, and in thinking about designing one's own life, and in particular thinking about designing my own. I do tend to also not be stuck by the boundaries of design, as Sarah said in my research interests. So anyways, today I went to his talk with our students, KCAD students, this afternoon, and I learned three things. First, that we need to be better at listening. In fact, we need to be so good at listening that we don't need to take notes. And he said this to our students, and I was like, what? But there you have it. Listen so well that you don't need to take notes. Second, that we need to aim more directly at understanding and at being understood. And this is very good advice for a dean. So I'm taking that to heart. And third, the more well-known you are, the less an introduction is needed. You're here because you're an audience in the know. And in this case, the less an introduction is actually wanted. In fact, I was asked to say nothing at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, Richard Saul Wurman.
Thank you. Make sure it's off today. 2 phone calls came in the middle of my speech. It was humiliating. When they were important calls, I had to take them. I won't take it, I promise. This is a lovely room. Lovely number of people here. It's really amazing. I mean, I like watching television. I don't go out at night and listen to people talk. I love television. How many people here love television? I love television. I really do. I'm still amazed by television. I know you're not supposed to love television and be an educated person, but every year at TED, someplace during the thing, just to cool things down, I say, I love television. I don't love some of the television. I'm a little tired of the Malaysian flight and of news that gets repetitive. I don't like the news on television. I don't think the news is very good anywhere on television. It used to be. And I really like the news. I really like the patterns in news. But between getting it a day or two late in newspapers, and I get 3 newspapers and scan them, but I know I've seen it before online, and I know I can't see it on television. There's not one. CNN used to be good, and news, what's happening, and the patterns of what's happening in the world and life is extremely important to me. And online, you can have this journey, this miracle of being interested in something and finding out about it. It's a miracle to me too. I don't take it for granted. At night at dinner, my wife and I eat in the kitchen. Every night we go out one night for dinner a week, and the rest of the time we we eat different things, and we have 2 big refrigerators. We live rather pretentiously in some ways and unpretentiously in others. We live in a big house, but we eat in the kitchen. And we have 2 huge refrigerators because we have a big kitchen, and GE paid for the whole kitchen, so they gave us 2 big refrigerators. And I scam everybody. And we have 2 refrigerators are like a cafeteria, so we take out different things. We have a housekeeper that leaves around 2, comes in early and leaves around 2, but you just can take out things, and I warm some things and she warms other, and we have 2 or 3 different kinds of soup and 2 or 3 different kinds of this, and we just pick out different things. And then we sit and we watch television. And that's a really nice part of the day, to look at some of the shows and some of the writing on some of the shows, some of even the, not the sitcoms, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about even some of these murder mysteries like True Detective or something. I mean, you can't imagine, some of the writing is better than any movies. It's such an art form, it's been brought up when you realize you're watching sometimes a 20-hour movie. You're watching a thing that goes on for a very long time. Such long-form, brilliant writing and convoluted passages. And they think of plots. If you look at Blacklist, you think of plots that you hardly imagine. And they're being developed by some of the brightest people in the world, in America. A few years ago, I was asked, I knew the guy was running the war room in the White House underneath the president's office, so he asked me to come over and tell him what I thought. So I came over, and it was, when I went over there, it was sort of crappy. I understand it's better now, but it was really primitive. They have some really great war rooms in West Virginia, but this was not one of them. And it was just terrible. I mean, it was just amateur night at the circus. And he said, he asked me what I thought could be done. I said, well, where I think you should be, you can't get there from where you are. That's just not, you can't get there. Like, if you get out the front door here and you say, how do I get to Beijing? You just don't get to Beijing from the front door of this building. You can't get there from here in any kind of sensible instructions. And I said, you couldn't get there. But I said, you should really watch the movies. Because in the movies, and television too, are some of them, everything that takes place was thought up by a human being. It was written by brilliant people, smarter people than are in Washington. Well, that's not even a joke. They are smarter people than would be in Washington. I mean, that's not meant to criticize the people in Washington. It's just the best people in the world don't work for the government by definition. I mean, you know that somebody who is really extraordinary would not run for president. Why would you? Why would you do you wouldn't do that. That wouldn't be your job of choice. So it's not a pejorative, and you have to understand that as a politician, I have to tell you what you want to hear, and I have to tell you what you want to hear, and I have to tell you what you want to hear, and I have to tell you what you want to hear. Therefore, I have to continuously lie. And that's the nature of the job. And if you're a CEO of a company, I can't tell you anything that's going to happen. I can't tell you if it's going well or not well. I can't tell you any of my secrets. I can't tell you the future. I can't tell the truth because I owe it to the stockholders. And yet, most all conferences are made up of politicians and CEOs. Isn't that strange? Look at it. If you look at a full-page ad for a big conference that they're going to have in New York from some big company having it, or you look at some other conferences that are run today, you see that half of them are people who are politicians or CEOs. Neither one can tell you the truth. And we're going to sit there in the audience and nod. And the other half of them are selling guilt, the gift that keeps on giving. For you to give money to make a better world. Well, that's a strange thing. It's not who I am. It's strange to tell the truth. It's hard to sometimes to tell the truth. But if you just listen to any sentence, people out there, how's it going? How's everything going? How you been? How you doing? You looking good? We're very happy to have you here. I'm really looking forward to your speech. And I say, no, you should tell me that after the speech. You don't look forward to a speech, you think about it afterwards, and you think if it was a good speech or not. After I leave, or when I leave, whether I give a lousy speech or I give a good speech, everybody will say it was a great speech. So I don't know if people are lying or not lying. But nobody would tell me leaving room that was a really shitty speech. Because people just don't tell the truth. Now I'm talking about the minutiae. This is just the minutiae of life, but it's all about design. It's about the design of how you talk to another human being. It's the design of speech. It's the design of everything I do, of how we understand. I rehearsed today this speech by talking to some wonderful students who were there today, and they listened to me. They were a wonderful audience, really lovely. I was talking with the dean, the speech that the dean was referring to, and I don't know, there was probably 20 students there. They were very nice, and I can tell when they're listening. You can really tell when an audience is listening. And why I asked you to sit up front, and I'm going to give a TEDx talk tomorrow, and I insisted that the house lights be up and the lights on my face be way down so I can see. But nobody insists on that. Nobody wants that. I'm the only speaker at TEDx tomorrow won't have, be blinded by lights in their face, and nobody asks to see the audience. The speech is about talking to somebody. That's what a speech is. The speech is my sense and what I get back from you. We're in this together. And if I lay a bomb, and I'll know if I go along I'm laying a bomb, it's not working, I'm going to feel shitty, and I'm going to know it. And you should know it. It's very, very real. How many people here did I stand up today by not coming to the luncheon? Is there anybody here from the city planning? Could you put up your hands so I see I'm talking to you? You're the only one? Nobody came? Well, if you would take my regrets back, I couldn't help it. I really was going to talk about something that I think they were interested in, and I'm sorry they didn't get here, but they had to replace 2 tires, and then a hose broke and something, and I was in the airport for 3 hours. I had all intentions of being here, and I hated being there. But I'll tell you what I was going to talk about, and then you can take the message back. I am interested in a lot of things. And that is the joy of my life and the curse of my life. I don't do anything deeply. I'm shallow, but I'm broad. I'm very broad in my interests, and I'm terribly interested in the connectivity, the connection between things, of how they relate. I'm interested in what I understand. What do I truly understand? I'm 79 years old, so I'm an old fuck. I'm an old man. I just am old. I know I'm old. I don't think I'm old up here, but I know I'm old. I mean, I know how old I am, and that's old. If I meet somebody at 79, I'm deferential because I think they're old. If I meet somebody at 69, I'm deferential because I think they're old. I think they're an old person. I should help them. I just feel that way. So I understand that, 90% or whatever it is, my life has passed. I can't live with that every minute because it would, I would be paralyzed. Early in my life, I had a few epiphanies, and that's appropriate to say in a religious building. They weren't religious epiphanies, but they became my religion. And the epiphanies, one was that I didn't understand anything. I just didn't understand a thing. I was empty. I was blank. I was the top student at the University of Pennsylvania School of Architecture. I got the gold medal, had the highest average, took more courses than anybody has ever taken before or since, got all the traveling fellowships, et cetera, and I knew nothing. I was absolutely vacuous. Everything I knew had been taught to me, and I sort of repeated it somehow. And there was nothing that was just knowing, just knowing. And I so much wanted to see patterns. And I loved maps, because maps seems to be, I made a little acronym. I try to be clever for myself all the time. I try to impress myself that I'm clever. I make up names. Ted was a name I made up. I was very fat, and it was like a teddy bear, and I gave away teddy bears at TED, and it was technology, entertainment, design, spelled TED, and I tried to be clever. And one thing I thought of was the word map is mankind's ability to perceive, M-A-P. That a map was the pure indication in graphic design and human design of putting together information in a visual form and numeric form and linguistic form that you could understand something, you could perceive something. That a chart of how a company did was a map of that company. That a chart of somebody's life, a timeline, that everything was a map. Everything around me that informed me was a map. It was my ability to perceive something, and so I took maps to heart and cartography to heart. Of really what, map wasn't just a pretty thing. A good map wasn't prettier than a bad map. It was the organization of information so you could find pattern recognition that so interested me. It was so interesting, and it put together that I saw everything in the form of maps. I play a lot of solitaire on my iPhone. I see them as maps, and I see them in everyone I see as a time in history. So sometimes they're a different time in the 20s or the 30s or the Middle Ages. I've never said this to an audience before because it makes me feel like I'm a nutcase, but I really do. Some things I've said before, but some things I haven't said before. So far, I haven't said this speech before. I've never given this speech. I never prepared this speech. I was going to talk about something else, but I got here. So, I started really thinking about cartography. And so when I was 26, with some students. Now, the pattern of my life is I do nothing. And I'm Mark Twain. People paid him to paint the fence, right? So I'm not going to tell you every single thing how I got it done, but trust me, I get things done. And I've done 80-some books, and I've done lots of conferences, and I've done lots of all kinds of stuff. I get it done. And they all look like I did it, and everybody who helped me has credit on it. So I'm not stealing people's things. The basic ideas are mine, but I can't do anything. I don't probably even drive very well. So one of my best friends, head of Radical Media, just last week I was talking to him on the phone. I said, John, he owns, John Kamen. You know Fog of War, he did Fog of War, and he's my partner on one of my mapping initiatives. And he's very skeptical always of what I do, but he's also very nice. And I said, John, I was telling this to you before. I had a 3-year lease on a car, and the lease was up, and I was so not knowing what to do about it, I just bought the car. And but I want to have the new car. I thought, wait, I'm 79. I should have one really sort of incredible car, sort of dream thing. Men dream about cars, and they should have that. And I can buy anything I want, and not without guilt, but I can buy it. I can write the check. I can write the check, is what I'm saying. And so I thought maybe I'll get a Jaguar convertible. No, maybe I'll get one of the big. Maybe I'll get a Bentley convertible. And then, no, that couldn't do that. I feel really weird now. And then I realized all I have is my 3-year lease. All I have is 2,900 miles in 3 years. So I hardly drive at all. That's 2 trips on my driveway. So the whole thing got to be silly, and John said, just go out and buy a car. It'll be your last anyway. And I went, you didn't say that to me. He said, yeah, you'll drive for a few years, then I won't let you drive. Maybe he's right. I remember my father, when he was turned 80-some, I wouldn't go in the car with him, and he stopped driving. But I'm not that way. I still drive. I like driving. I drive through Europe. When I go to Europe with my wife, we drive, and we rent a car, and I drive all through Europe. And most of our friends that are 2/3 our age don't do that. Are scared to drive in Europe. So, Driving is one of those amazing things in your life. It's very similar to Google in a way. And it's similar to Google because I remember when I thought I couldn't ride a two-wheeler. And you get on and you fall off, you get on, you fall off, and you don't know how to do it. And then all of a sudden, you're riding a two-wheel bicycle. All of a sudden, you don't know when it happened, but you're right, and you have freedom. You can do something splits. It's like the seas part, you know, and you can go somewhere. You have this freedom. And that happens when you drive, and it happens when we sit around the dinner table and we bring up something, and I say, no, it's this and that, or what is the name of that? And I take out my iPhone, I look it up on Google, and we find out right away. That's magic. That's magic. Do you understand how amazing it is to do that? To think of something, to ask a question, and have it there. I used to be sent away from the dinner table by my father if we were talking about something at dinner, and I didn't know what I was talking about. He sent me upstairs to look it up in Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was arduous. So I talked less. It's still magic to me that you can ask, and you know this is just the beginning, but that you can actually find out things. Finding out things, finding something, is astonishing. I'm going to tell a story I told this afternoon, but I'll get into it a little bit deeper. So I apologize to some of the people who were here this afternoon, but this is just appropriate now. I won't apologize again. In 1297, I remember a lot of stuff. I don't have a photographic memory, but I have a very good memory. So just put up with it. In 1297, in Mainz, Germany, they're not absolutely certain of the date. In fact, if you Google it, you'll find two different dates within the Google. But I believe it's 1297. Gutenberg was born in Mainz, Germany. And in 1340, with his brother's help on the press, but mostly himself, he carved out type, an alphabet of 126 letters. That's really very important. You probably didn't know that. But he did every combination of letters so that perfectly recurrent, perfect relationship between letters. That the space, you know, the letters don't fit together perfectly, and you have to space them slightly different because they leave different white spaces between them. So you have to really adjust that. And he did all that adjustment for the whole alphabet and every condition of every letter being next to each other. He had 126 letters he did. Remarkable. It's never been done better since. John Warnock, who was the founder of Adobe, that does type, in a speech years ago at TED said, we've never been able to do it as well. We can't do it as well as the original Gutenberg Bible. Published between 180 and 200 of his 42-line Bible. A few of those had red on it. He put it through the press twice. The press was like a wine press. It was not a big deal. The big deal was not the printing press, because it just printed like a wine press. It like squeezed. But he had invented paper because they just had vellum. They had to have paper that squeezed in on the type, and they could lift it off one sheet at a time. So he had to do the paper that would work. He had to do an ink that it was oil-based, so he rolled it on, it stayed from drying, because they did all manuscripts by painting, and it was a water-based paint that dried. And he printed these things, these Bibles. 99 years later, somebody invented page numbers. Do you realize what page numbers are? That allows you to find something. That's design. That's finding something. That's really innovation. That's not a minor choice. It's not just a good graphic designer. That's the realization that these 200 books were not mass production of information, that some people feel is the greatest, one of the great inventions of all civilization, but you could actually find something. What the printing press allowed to happen was you could print over and over again the same thing. 180, 200 Bibles did not make for mass communication. They still were terribly expensive. It still was communication only for very wealthy people. What it did was allow you to print a sheet over and over again, and they printed pieces of paper that could be signed by a priest. So it's appropriate to talk about religion here again. And they were called indulgences. That's one of the things that Martin Luther pinned up on the church that he was against in the Catholic Church, was the making of money through indulgences, and the indulgences come back to Gutenberg's Bible and the press. Everything we do has consequences. And as we spoke today a bit about unintended consequences, you don't know when you design something what it's going to be or where things come from. We have street curbs all over the place. The main reason for street curbs in New York first was obviously when the wagon came by, it didn't splash on you, it stopped some of the splashing on you. It also stopped you from walking on an absolute carpet of horse shit. Every city was filled up to street curbs, which were higher, with horse shit. There was millions of horses around in the good old days. And something as innocent as something that's still around that we don't even know where it came from, and that's in every plan, every city, everywhere in the world. You always have a curb, whether you need it or not, you have a curb. Now they cut the curbs in every city so you can have a wheelchair go up on them. They don't want the curb. They could do without the curb. I just came back 2 weeks ago. I gave a speech in Milan and decided to go to Parma. I wanted to see the baptistry again. Hadn't seen it in a while. And then went on to Bologna. And Bologna is a city of arcades. You can walk around the whole city of Bologna in arcades. If you haven't been to Bologna sometime, go to Bologna. It's off the big tourist track. Lots of people don't go to Bologna. The church there, it's wonderful. And the arcades that are pervasive through the city, a whole city where the second floor goes to the street line and where everything is protected. If it rains, you don't get wet. There's a novel thing, isn't it? We go to Venice and Piazza San Marco, both sides, we love it so much it has those arcades, so when it rains, which it does some frequency there, you're protected. But you never think of doing it here, do you? Can you walk around this whole city? You can walk all around Bologna and never get wet when it rains. You can meet people there. There's cafes there. It's such a simple thing. And think of the advantage for the tenants, the people who own the buildings. They get more buildings. Their buildings go to the street line, up 15 feet. You have a double win. And the sidewalks are all lit because they're lit from the building above. In 1962, I did a book with some students in North Carolina when I was 26. I think I was 26. And in North Carolina, they were rather proud that, or this class was, this whole school was, some of the students who had never been above the Mason-Dixon line and certainly didn't know city. I brought up the term I was talking about, Alvar Aalto, and that I had met him at his home north of Helsinki, and they said, "What's a Helsinki?" As today, many schools don't teach much about geography. And geography is a hard subject. They brought up recently all the things in Kiev and Crimea. I didn't know where Crimea was. Did everybody here know where Crimea was? I didn't know Crimea was a peninsula there. I didn't know. I mean, I feel stupid. I do maps all the time. I didn't know. We don't know a lot of things. Anyway, I said, well, I'm going to develop this list of cities, and we're each going to do a plan of a city. So we start learning about the cities by doing the plans. And I said, we'll make them all the same scale, sort of casually. And it turned out to be profound for me So we did 50 cities of the world with plans all to the same scale. We made them out of plasticine, that white kindergarten clay, and put them on masonite boards. So a small town, like Palma Nuova, one of those Renaissance towns, took up one board that was about 17 inches square. There was a reason for that, because it was double 8.5 inches. That comes into it later. But I thought ahead. It was 17 inches square, and then a big city might be 2 of them, 4 of them, or 16 of them. But each one was a panel, so it was big enough that I could photograph it, each one separately, dead down, without any perspective. And the plasticine got put them on. Water was black, and the plasticine was off-white. And we put together some nails with rubber bands, and we stippled them, and that was forest. And we used balsa wood and pressed it down for the main roads, and did these models of cities that looked like sand models, really. And they were all to the same scale, and we published them in plates. So some of the plates are big. Well, I think we printed 1,000 of them. Word of mouth from North Carolina in 1962 or 3, whenever it was, they were gone in about 2 weeks. Word of mouth around the world. It was on the cover of our Norwegian magazine, architectural magazine, the frontispiece of Architecture d'Aujourd'hui, the big French architectural magazine. The School of Architecture at Yale mounted them and put them on exhibit in the School of Architecture, and they're there for about 25 years. And what I found is nobody had ever done it before. Nobody had ever looked at these cities to the same scale. And they were revelatory. I never knew that Paris was so big. It's like 4 times bigger than Rome. And downtown Philadelphia is sort of this big, the same size as Washington, the same size as Versailles. And something else is big, small, and all of a sudden, some places, many places I had been to, they took on new meaning, and when I went back to them, it was astonishing. I had such a deeper appreciation for the scale, the size, the distance, the humanity of each place. It just changed my whole look at things. It was an epiphany for me that you only understand something relative to something you understand. I won't tell you the things that led up to this, but I told a story today about beginning a speech, because you see I begin anywhere, it doesn't make any difference, but I began a speech out in the West about 2 or 3 months ago that came off the last word of the introduction to me because they were commenting on something that had happened a year before, and it was a pot of whales. So I started talking about whales. And I gave some semi-technical, not very interesting things about the sperm whale being about 68, 70 feet long, the largest toothed animal in the world. Head is 1/3 of its body. Its brain cavity is 5 times the size of man's brain cavity, the largest cavity of any animal that we know. And the sperm doesn't come from real sperm. It comes from a kind of waxy, oily stuff that's in the head that was used for not only burning, that's why they almost went extinct, but because it's used for ambergris, which is the basis of, and still is used as a basis of, some very expensive perfumes. But the biggest animal that we know of, including all animals that are now dead that we have found so far, dinosaurs, is the blue whale. And the blue whale is a little over 100 feet long and slender. And it doesn't have teeth, as you know. It just sieves the krill through its mouth. And we don't know very much about them. We don't know where they live exactly. We don't know where they gather exactly. We don't know how they spawn. We don't know very much about the blue whale. The biggest thing, it's like the 777 that went down off of Malaysia. There's something that big, we just don't know much about it. It's strange. The biggest animal, we don't know very much about it. That's why that's so mysterious and so boring. It's both. It's both. So that was all. And then I said, but I'm going to tell you something about the blue whale. Its tongue is as big as a bus. Its heart is as big as a Volkswagen. The aorta is so big you can swim through it. Now, there's nobody in this room who goes out to a bar and the next week you won't turn to somebody and tell them that. Because it's so interesting. And now you know how big that animal is. You know it in a way that you didn't know it before. It's magic. You know it in a way that you won't forget it. It's not trivial. It's so fundamental that you only understand something relative to something you understand, and you can move on from that. It's that dumb. I mean, it's really a dumb thing. This is not esoteric. This is a fundamental human characteristic of understanding. And if we don't understand it about our cities, the largest invention of humankind, there's 4,003 cities of over 100,000 people in the world. I just found that out yesterday. Somebody called me. His name is Saul Angel. His name is really Shlomo Angel, but he calls himself on his email Saul Angel. And he called me and told me he's working on a project at NYU and is liking what I was doing, and he wanted to call me. And he told me that as of 6 months ago, they had counted 4,003 cities of over 100,000 people in the world. I don't know. That's what he told me. I don't know how to check that. But no two cities in the world do their maps to the same scale or collect their information in the same way or display it in the same way or have legends that are the same. So in one city, this is within the United States as well as the world. So within the United States also, so I'm not just talking about the great washed or the great unwashed or the third world or the fourth world or Europe or Asia. I'm talking about the world. I'm talking about the United States included. I don't know what this city has on its legends, but on the legends you have land use. So one city will call an airport open space, another will call it transportation, another will call it commercial, another will call it whatever they call it. They have 28 different ways of what they call an airport. They have 28 ways of what they call light industrial, heavy industrial, toxic industrial, large, small, this, that, high, short, steel, open space, how many workers are there. Everything is called something else. So you can't compare one city to another. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you don't want to do it. But I do. And these are not done for you, they're done for me. And I want to know something relative to something else. I want to know what Shanghai is relative to Sao Paulo. I don't know at all what they're like. I can't draw you a map of Sao Paulo. Can anybody here sit down and draw me a map of Sao Paulo? Really big city, bigger than Rio in population. We can't draw a map of it. We have no idea about it. We can't compare it to anything else. I want to build a Volkswagen factory, and I have, because of tax breaks and other political things, I have it narrowed down to do it in Shanghai or Sao Paulo. I want to compare them. The level of education, the time to work, the quality of air, the port facilities, the population within so much thing, the educational facilities, all the different various programs, the crime. You can't do that. Wouldn't you think you'd want to? It's the biggest thing going, cities. It's what we are. I've done 7 or 8 books on medicine. I found that the various fields in medicine don't speak the same language. They call things differently. You don't want to get 2 people from 2 different departments operating on you. I mean, they literally don't talk the same language. I interviewed a small particle physicist and the head of the Juno mission to Jupiter on stage a year and a half ago, and I said, you both look at the periodic tables differently. One just looks at the light elements of hydrogen and helium, and the other one, and all the rest don't matter, they're all heavy. And the other one not only looks at every one of the elements, but are constantly trying to invent new subatomic particles, which are new elements, and you look at every single one of them, and you both have different definition of the word elegance, which is a physics term. And you're both physicists. People in the same field don't talk the same language. My obsession is really just trying to have a conversation and think that what I'm saying, you understand, and I understand what you're saying. And our basis is not that kind of communication. I did a book of houses where I cut through them one way, cut through them another way, and did them all to the same scale so I could understand them. And I had no idea. And I've said to art and architecture, or whatever it is, or the Condé Nast thing with rich people's houses in it. I forget what it's called. You know what I mean. Architectural Digest. I said, why don't you just, in the back of each issue, the houses that you have there, just print a little, just take one page, print the plans of each building you're talking about to the same scale on the back so you can understand what you just read in the whole issue. So you can see some are big houses, some are little teeny apartments, some are big things. You have an understanding. Because I know they don't take the house and its grounds. You have no idea its setting or how big the house is relative to the property, or you really can't tell. They never put a plan down. And that would give me a sense of the privacy of the house. It would give me a whole different level of understanding and understand that whole issue. And it might give them some reason to do an issue with a theme in it so you could understand those things. They're not going to do it. But I thought it was a good idea. I know I would enjoy that. Understanding precedes action. You should understand something before you take action. But that's not the way city planners work. City planners work in their own place, and they try to make their city better without any use coming out of what other people have done that have worked and not worked, failure and success, and see what might work because they have similar situations. There's no body of literature on that. Well, I interviewed Zeke Emanuel on stage. He was the point person for Obamacare, and I said, so Zeke, are you looking at all what other countries do in healthcare? No. I said, do you think you might be doing that? No. And that was the end of the question, that whole line of questioning. So I looked at 5 countries and asked 5 questions. And I did a wheel. You know, wheel, so you turn the wheel with holes in it and you can see the different answers. And there's a question like, what's the maternity leave in your country? So, the United States, it's 12 weeks unpaid. Well, okay. In India, it's 12 weeks paid. In Norway, it's 46 weeks paid. Every country is different. And I called it FedMed, what federal governments do about healthcare. And I'm going to work on 50 countries, a project of mine now, 50 countries, asking them 50 questions and comparing them. Not saying it's good or bad, just seeing the patterns of what they do. It's not a value judgment. I don't think 12 weeks paid or 12 weeks unpaid is better or worse, but I sure would like to know about it. It would be interesting if you go the next step and say, what does that cost to do, and what are the implications of it, or is there any way of rating the metrics of if that's good or bad, of how much money is spent on diabetes and the rate of diabetes and when it comes in? Just a few more questions. Simple questions across the board, the same question, not political questions. Of course, telling the truth is a political act. I don't know if you heard that, because that's a nasty statement. Telling the truth is a political act. And that's all I want to do that. I went in to see Rupert about 3 months ago, and he picked up on, Rupert Murdoch, and he picked up on that. We were sitting talking. I was asking him to do something about a conference I'm doing called 555, which is going to take place in 5 cities around the world, with 5 speakers in each city, 25 speakers in total together, and they're each going to give a prediction for the next 5 years. So it's called Finding the Future First. And I had the wheel there, and he picked it up. He said, "What's this?" And I told him what it was. He said, "Oh, you could tell the truth and make it political. You don't have to slant the truth to make a political statement. You can just tell the truth and it's political." And I thought, wow, that's fascinating. I never thought about it that way. Most things I don't think about until somebody reacts to them. Then I think, oh, I see now a pattern that's interesting. Because I see if I had these 50 countries and you saw what they did that worked well, that would be interesting to companies because they'd want to sell into that. And if you see things that didn't work well, that would be interesting to companies because they'd want to sell into that. Isn't that funny? Both sides of the thing. If it works well, you want to sell into that. If it doesn't work well, you want to sell into that. There's an interesting business there in just comparative analysis of information about healthcare, which is about 20% of the global GNP. That's a big business. So with the plans of cities, I thought up this idea called 19-20-21, about 19 cities of the world that will have more than 20 million people in the 21st century. Another clever thing. And part of it, I brought up something I had done for the Walker Arts Center in 1970, which was called the Urban Observatory. It was part of a book called Making the City Observable, one of their design quarterlies. I did several of those design quarterlies. And this is a big project. So I called up the same man, John Kamen, who runs Radical Media, and he has offices around the world, and he has great talents. And then I got friendly with a gentleman by the name of Jack Dangerman. I'd never heard of him, then I heard a lot about him. And he still lives in Redlands, California. That's nowhere. It's 2 hours west of LA in the Inland Empire near Ontario Airport. Funny little town. He went to high school there. He's proud that the trees on Main Street, his father had a nursery and he planted the trees on Main Street and they're big now. Jack's about 60, 65. He went to the local Redlands College. There's a little college in the town, little teeny town. And then he went off, got into Harvard Graduate School of Design, and got his master's degree in landscape architecture. And then he went back home, never practiced one day of landscape architecture, but he opened a company on mapping. He got involved in interest in GIS mapping, maps that have information in it. Some of you probably know what GIS mapping is. It's the pervasive kind of thoughtful, information-based mapping. So he started a little company in Redlands. He now has 8,000 employees. He's a multi-billionaire. He's on Forbes' list. He's my friend, and he sort of funds my ideas. So we're doing an urban observatory. We started one, and there's a website I suggest you look at. It's free. Just called urbanobservatory.org. If you put Urban Observatory and it says compare, don't look at there's a lousy video on it. Just look at the thing that says start comparing. And it's the proof of concept that we did that came out last year. It's going to be astonishingly better by this July. We had 13 cities we started with. This July we'll have over 50. And next February in the ground floor, in the best space that you can have in the redo of the castle on the mall of the Smithsonian, we'll have an exhibit called the Urban Observatory, a permanent exhibit of comparative analysis of 78 cities in the world. And for the first time, you can compare one city to another. And you make the scale of one bigger, they all get bigger. And you make it smaller, they all get smaller. You change a city and you can only really look at 3 at a time. The exhibit we did last July, we had 9 up, and I couldn't. It was megalomania on my part. It's my mistake. It was totally my mistake, a very costly mistake, but it was a learning mistake. You had to build it, and all of a sudden, seeing more of it, you couldn't see anything. But 3, you can look at the patterns across them, and so we can have a navigation panel, and we can put any 3 we want, and keep on changing it, and then you can put any information across you want it. He also owns Landsat, which is helpful. He's a terrific guy. Lovely man. He has 2,400 acres up in the hills there, and he grows avocados and oranges, so I get lots of boxes of avocados and oranges. And blood oranges, they're just terrific. And he and his wife run the company, period. There's no second in command. It's an astonishing place. He has 14 buildings. And he hosted me for doing a conference Better than any conference I ever did in my life. Much better than TED. Much better than any TED I did, and a hell of a lot better than the TEDs that go on now. Really a good meeting. I decided I would go back to the beginning. What's the beginning? I was telling you about beginnings. How do you start? What's this basic thing of just talking to somebody? What is the beginning? What can you take away from things? How do you find the essence of something? And I drove into San Francisco and I saw a big, big billboard. San Francisco, the innovation city. Honda, the car of innovation. Innovation, everything is innovation. Every ad has innovation in it. And most of the innovations are just little teeny changes. Innovation is going to be orange pants. That's innovation. Everything is styling. It's not innovation. I compare, the joke I make about it is that innovation is putting a camera on the back of a car so you see who you run over. A few years ago, I did a book that still people like. I signed a few copies here, but it's 20 years old. And it still reads all right, called Information Anxiety. And I came to a chapter when I was doing the books. I don't write at all. I can't type. I dictate. I just talk into a dictating machine and somebody transcribes it. So it all sounds like me talking because it is me talking. And I did Information Anxiety. I got to this chapter, which my preconception is that there was an enormous, almost just maybe hundreds of ways of organizing information, but obviously part of information anxiety is when you begin any job, you want to see how you're going to organize that information. And I thought there must be just so many ways. And I kept on thinking about all the ways, and as I kept on thinking, I could only come up with 5. And no matter what I did, I came up with 5. And then I talked to some other people, and I said, I think there's just 5 ways of organizing information. I gave speech after speech after speech. If you tell me there's a 6th, my next speech will be that there's 6. I think in the book I said, I can only come up with 5. This is not scientific, but because I've tried so hard, and the book has sold so well, and I've given so many speeches, we'll say there's less than 10. There's 5, apparently. Taschen just did a big, fat book. I don't know why I needed 2 hands for that. Big, fat book, which they asked me to write an introduction for, but I didn't know it was going to be a big, fat book. They just said they were doing a book on information design. Would I write an introduction? So I sort of stole some stuff that I had written before, put it together, and updated it, and gave them this nice introduction. It's a pretty good introduction. It was good before, and it got better this time. It's similar to the introduction I did for Information Architects, I think, or one of my books. It's similar. It's a little bit better. Anyway, I sent it to him, and I forgot about it. Then I get this big mother book in the mail. I got 3 copies in the mail. I mean, cocktail table book. You know, Taschen does cocktail table books. You can put legs on them, right? And I'm going through, and of course, I see my name big. It's on the cover as one of the editors. I like that. And then nice type inside, and the written part, there's a couple introductions by the author who I don't remember meeting. She's in Germany or Belgium or someplace. And it's cut back from it's just not as wide. It's not important to the story. I don't know why I'm doing that. But the rest of the book, that much of it, except for this much of the written material, that much of it is beautiful examples of information architecture, of information design. And the page that faces the beginning of the back of the book has the word on top, latch. And I said, those sons of bitches, they stole my idea because the 5 ways were L-A-T-C-H. It was called latch, the latch theory. And there's some stuff where people have done videos on it, and they've done animation on latch and everything. They stole it. But then the whole story was about me inventing it, so they're okay. But they made it like science. I mean, they made it by... They gave it some credibility. But they didn't ask me, but I'm fine. Somebody's going to think up some other ways. And it will not last. Nothing lasts. Nothing is going to be here. Before I did the 3rd TED, I saw that there was a bunch of Japanese coming to the 3rd TED from Dentsu, the biggest advertising agency in the world at that time. And they came and we talked. They had heard that this was a great conference. after the second one. They heard it was great, and they wanted to come over. So 18 Japanese executives from Dentsu and other things came over, and I thought, oh, they're just here to play golf because it's near Pebble Beach. No, they played golf, but they did attend some of the conference, and they had little translators talking to them. And they said, we want to do one in Japan. Now, at that time, we all thought Japan Inc. was going to take over the world. But they, we didn't know, thought all the ideas still come from America. And they wanted this conference because it was like Guess Jeans, right? And I lived in New York in a loft, and I knew I made a good deal with them. They didn't buy the conference, but they bought me for doing this conference. And so TED 4 was in Kobe, Japan. And I worked on it intensively for the following year. And, but the time is so different, and the language is impossible. The only way I could do the conference, absolutely the only way I could do the conference would not have happened. I couldn't have worked with the team in Japan unless we had a fax machine. And all day we sent faxes. And all night, because I always work at home, I heard the fax machine going, and they came out rolled up. That's the way it used to be. They used to be on that paper that got warm and rolled up, and the whole floor was covered. Next morning, people would just try to get them the right pages together. They would be translated answers to everything I'd asked. I did the whole thing because of a machine. And now, nobody uses the fax machine. Something that was absolutely, we needed it. I'll fax you. Fax me. We don't do it. It's gone. And so is your iPhone going to be gone. And so is everything else you use is not going to be here. And the people who have the most difficulty with that are the youngest people here. Because you can't believe it won't be here. It isn't going to be here. Everything is going to change. Everything you know is going to change. So just don't buy into it as being always here. Every always here thing is not going to be here. There's going to be something that just flips something completely differently. I'm going to be able to soon just talk to you, and I'll be talking to you, and you will hear Finnish, and you'll answer me, and I'll hear English. And all you speak is Finnish. And it'll be that smooth. We'll be able to do that pretty well in about 5 years. There's things that are going to remarkably change how we talk to each other, how we communicate with each other, how we travel, how we ship things or don't ship things, or create things, and how we get so many things wrong. Everybody's talking about 3D printing. It's not 3D printing. It's 3D imaging. The printer's a dumb printer. The printer just goes, puts dots of crap down. That's all it is. You can put sugar down and make candy. You can do pieces of steak and make a steak down. You can put anything you want down, but it's the imaging and the technology of the imaging and how you can translate that imaging and what materials you can put down with that, and then how can you give some of those things life so you can have human organs, not just the shape of the organ, but a functioning thing that it has the spark of life in it. That's more than 5 years out, the spark of life. You've been fed some stuff about making lungs and some kidneys yet. They can make it, but they can't make them live yet, in spite of what CNN and Sanjay Gupta tells you. Sanjay's a good guy. Sanjay is a good guy, but he has headlines to make too. How long have I talked now? Because I haven't gotten anywhere. Just tell me.
Wind down.
Wind down. I'm supposed to wind down. I haven't touched anything yet. Well, I told you about the Urban Observatory. I told you about 555, which I'm going to start. It's going to be in 5 cities around the world next year. I'm doing a book, which is, the working title is called I Worship the God of Understanding and the Angels of Clarity and Transparency of Source. Absolutely unworkable title. I'm aware of that. I am quite aware of that. But it has in it the thoughts I have about the book, and maybe the book will just be called 4 or something. But that's my working title. I said working title. The angels of clarity and transparency of source is not lying, it's telling the truth. That's what that means. In a wordy way, but it's what it means. So I'm doing that. I don't know, I guess I'm winding down with some of that stuff. That's enough. 3 questions. Make them good and not speeches. Does anybody have a question? Don't give me a speech. Please. By the way, come here, Sarah. We know what's going to happen when I say what I'm going to say because it's a response of people. So just don't do it, and you will be more impressive if you keep your silence. Because nothing is better to do when you give your appreciation for somebody than silence. She obviously did a lot of work in putting this thing together this year. And I don't know her. But I understand from snooping around, and she thanks everybody. And you always thank everybody, it's what you do. But apparently, she was the leader of doing an awful lot of things, and we thank you, Sarah. Okay. See how impressive it is to be silent? Because the other is just knee-jerk. As is standing ovations, knee-jerk. 3 questions. Yes, sir. Where are you from?
Jiva from Metro Detroit, born in India.
Born where in India?
Pune.
Pune. Yeah.
Southeast of Bombay.
Yeah.
Came here 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So my question is, what do you use as your source of inspiration?
Mel Brooks did a record called The 2,000-Year-Old Man. Of course, that's foolish because he was talking about cavemen and they were 25,000 years ago or more. But that was the record. He did this record. It was very famous when they did humor records. And he was asked in that, so, you didn't have buses, you didn't have cars. What did you use for transportation back then? And he said, fear. Saber-toothed tiger came, we ran. That was our transportation. Now ask me your question again.
It's the same question still, but
I said, ask me the question again.
what do you resort to for your own inspiration? For example,
Fear. Fear of having an uninteresting life. Fear of not understanding something. Fear of being a stupid asshole. Fear of not being able to explain something. Fear of just phoning it in. Fear of telling lies. Fear. Discomfort. Comfort is not your friend. It is not your friend, no matter that, even though you were taught that. Starting off as a private and ending as a general is not the only silo. Your silo can fall over and you can be interested in anything and everything. The last TED conference I did was in 2003, and my subtext, the subtitle of it was simply the greatest design conference that ever was. That's how pompous I was. And nobody called me on it. Nobody said, you. And I had 12 sessions, and each session had a title. Never did this before, never did it again. I never had titles to sessions. I decided I would do it this way. I was sort of screwing over somebody. A lot of things in my life are revenge. So I could have said revenge instead of fear, same thing. So each session was the design of something, the design of the near future. That's the 555 conference. The design of humor. That's what humor is, an astonishing thing. It's the opposite of expectation. It's a radical alternative. It's one of the most creative things the mind does. We laugh, we tell jokes which are the opposite of what you think something's going to happen. It's what physicists do for breakthroughs. in theory. It's what artists do when they do things. It's a joke. The design of music, the design of the car. I had $20 million worth of concept cars in the exhibition room that BMW and everybody in the world sent me at unbelievable cost in a circle around, and you watched the conference in the simulcast room if you didn't want to be in the auditorium. 500 people sat around the cars and watched the conference, and they could sit in these race cars and these concept cars. I did it because I could. And I just asked them to send them. I mean, this is a trip. This is really exciting. I mean, it's playtime. I mean, who gets to play? The last session of the 12, and the last talk of the 12th session was Frank Gehry and myself, and it was the design of your life. And we just sat and chatted. Didn't show any slides. We just talked to each other because we know each other well. We've known each other for a long time. And that was it. And then it was over, and I cried. I'm crying now. I cry in front of people, which is the opposite of your expectation because you don't think I'm that person, but I do cry. I cry a lot. And I feel better every time I cry because I know that was good. I'm not such a jerk. I always worry about being really a jerk. I think design is everything I do. Every movement you make, every little mudra, every little thing you do is design. And I like to do it thoughtfully. Lou said that architecture is a thoughtful making of space. You want to know, you're in this room and you feel how it's made. And it feels good to know how it's made. You feel the making of this space. It's a very nice place to give a talk. One more question. Yes, sir. What do you want to be when you grow up? That's actually a good question, even though he said it sort of, well, he might have meant it. He'll say that he meant it philosophically. Of course he will. The second book I did on Lou Kahn, of the two, was after he died. He was the most important person in my life. The second book I did was a number of years after he died. I kept on working on it for quite a while. And it was the book I wanted to have, and it was the collection of all the edited writings and speeches, transcribed all his speeches that I could find. I had 125 hours of his tapes. And then stories about him. I'd gone around the world talking to people. Stories not always nice about him, most of the time okay, interesting, funny stories. Stories about his death, his life, his students, his odd life. And then some facsimile pages out of his writings, none of his buildings, and some pictures of him. I had a big collection of photos of him. And I wrote a 1.25-page introduction to the book, that's all. And the first line is, I think, the best line I ever wrote. And the first line said, "He was the youngest person I ever knew." Bye-bye.